We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war,
to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of all people, and of nations large and small.
to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom,
And for these ends, to practice tolerance and live together in peace as good neighbors.
to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security,
To ensure that armed force shall not be used save in the common interest.
to employ international machinery in the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all people,
Have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims.
In the service of these ends, we gathered this morning in affirmation, commitment, and worship.
Buenos días y bienvenidos. Good morning and welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. I am the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin. My pronouns are she or ella.
Namaste and good morning. I'm Abhi Janamanchi. I use the pronouns he, him, and I too join Reverend Katie in extending a warm welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are joining us from, and whatever your beliefs, gender identity, immigration status, or disability, you are welcome here at Cedar Lane.
If you are new or feel new, you're invited to complete the newcomer form that will be linked in the chat if you're online, or you can raise your hand if you're here in person and someone will bring it to you. And I want you to know that if you've been attending for a while and you're interested in becoming a member, you can come see me.
Our pastoral visitors are an extension of our ministry team. They are available this morning to support you in person, and we thank Betsy Binks, our pastoral visitor, who is here with us, and also Carol Rogentine and Mala Wedberg. Thank you. And we have a few announcements. So, Katie, it's getting close.
It is 1 week.
That's right. The Dare to Dream raffle ticket sale is going to be ending soon, friends, on October 28th. So please get your tickets if you want to be spared this shameless haranguing from your ministers. Get your tickets if you haven't already, and if you have, reach out to your friends, neighbors, and coworkers to have them get tickets. The more you get, the better the chances are. And the drawing will be next Sunday, October 31st. And now our board president, Nate Holtman, who has so many gifts, and we recently found out he's also a bit of a ham. So we invite you to see this wonderful video and know some fun things about what you can do with $5,000.
Hi, I'm Nate Holtman, board president of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church, and I'm here to ask you a question. What could you do with $5,000? Maybe take a trip to Europe? Finally go for those new kitchen cabinets. Get some new outdoor hiking gear. Put it toward a new electric vehicle, home theater, hot tub. Donate the money to a favorite charity. Or maybe, if like me, you like rocks, moss, and gravel, you could head to Kyoto to see the famous Japanese gardens there. So with that in mind, I've got another question for you. Have you bought your raffle ticket yet for the Cedar Lane Dare to Dream fundraiser? If you win, you could reach that dream, and in the process help with some worthy causes. But time is running out. October 28th is the deadline to buy tickets. Tickets are just $25, and you can purchase as many as you'd like. In addition to the $5,000 grand prize, there are 9 other chances to win, including prizes of $500, $250, and $100. In fact, we're hoping you'll spread the word so everyone you know can participate. The raffle is for anyone and is not restricted to Cedar Lane members. The winner will be announced on October 31st after church services around 12:30 p.m. Winners do not have to be there to collect. In addition to the prizes, this fundraiser helps to continue the great work of Cedar Lane, from supporting social justice initiatives, to running our religious education program, to helping with environmental impact issues, to feeding those in need. The money we raise here will make a difference in our beloved community. So go ahead and buy a ticket, or 4 or 5, and ask your friends and family to join us as well. Dare to dream and dare to make a difference.
You know what goes well with dreaming of
What?
donuts.
There you go.
And
We
we're
are.
having, right? Donuts?
Yeah. We're a food-based religion.
We are, that's true. And we will be enjoying donuts along with a visit with Dr. John King at coffee hour today out in the courtyard. So I hope you will all join us. And while you're out there, I hope that you will complete a reopening survey. Now, if you're online, I'm sorry, we don't have virtual donuts, but you can still complete the reopening survey. The link is in the chat. And your input is going to help us with our leadership so we can continue to reopen safely as we promote connections and community.
And join us today at 4 p.m. for a special UN Day forum taking action on climate change, where we'll get to hear some insights from a range of leading experts on what we can do as individuals and faith organizations locally and nationally to meet the ambitious goals of the Paris Agreement. The program will also provide an update on the preparations of the Biden administration for COP26, the UN Change Conference, the Climate Change Conference, taking place in Glasgow in early November.
Now, while you're in the courtyard, not too far from the donuts is a shed with instructions on how to engage in our UU-themed scavenger hunt, which is happening now. And if you missed the scavenger hunt, that's okay. Mark your calendars for Trunk or Treat, which is going to be right after service on Sunday. Costumes are welcome next week.
And now I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing our Sunday morning speaker and welcoming him again, but this time in person to Cedar Lane, Dr. John King. Dr. John King is a lifelong educator who served in President Obama's administration as the 10th Secretary of Education. Deeply dedicated to public education, he serves as president and CEO of the Education Trust, a national nonprofit civil rights organization that seeks to identify and close opportunity and achievement gaps from preschool through college for BIPOC students and those from low-income backgrounds. Dr. King delivered the first, and we hope only, virtual 2020 Kiplinger Lecture on the moral imperative of educational equity last August in 2020. In addition to being a lifelong educator and activist for educational equity, Dr. King continues to lead on issues of advancing environmental and economic justice, dismantling mass incarceration and providing second chances, combating hunger and homelessness, preventing gun violence, and other social justice issues. Dr. King's family has deep roots here in Maryland. His great-grandfather, Charles King, was enslaved just 25 miles from his home in Montgomery County, and the cabin where his ancestors lived still stands. And his grandmother, Miss Estelle Livingston Stansberry King, was among the first black graduates of the University of Maryland Eastern Shore in 1894. Dr. King lives in Silver Spring with his wife, Melissa, who's here with us. Welcome. Who's a former kindergarten and first grade teacher, and his two daughters who attend public schools. Welcome, Dr. King. We're delighted and honored to have you with us this morning. And let's give him, again, a warm Cedar Lane welcome.
As we enter this time of reflection and remembrance, connection and community, we acknowledge that we gather as Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church on the traditional land of the Nacotchtank people from which the name Anacostia is derived. They were part of the Piscataway group of tribes, and we honor that the indigenous people of this land were here before us, are here with us now, and will continue to be with us in the future. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who've protected it through the generations.
We remember those who were enslaved and worked this land without choice or reward. And we remember all who have gone before us, whose vision, sacrifice, and labor created and continues to sustain this, our beloved religious community. In this spirit, we gather. In this spirit, we begin. Let us now turn and greet each other, our neighbors, and in the chat.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I am Ezra Town. My pronouns are they, them, and I am your worship associate for today's service. As Don Bliss and Marlene Berg kindle the chalice in honor of United Nations Day, please share in the chat where you are lighting your chalice from. Embracing the interconnected web of water, air, fire, space, and earth, we kindle a chalice of sustaining hope, love, and justice. As we give thanks for this earth, our shared and singular home, we dedicate ourselves to its ongoing care.
So I wonder what's in the Wonder Box today. A magic 8-ball. Let's see, magic 8-ball. How do we save our planet? Ask Rosie Clemens Cope. Rosie, can you help us out? Come on up.
Good morning, everyone. Hello. My name is Rosie Clemens Cope, and I'm an 8th grader at Julius West Middle School. I'm a climate activist for our local Sunrise Hub of the Sunrise Movement, fighting for climate, jobs, and justice. I also lead Fridays for Future climate strikes every Friday at my middle school and educate my friends and other students about the science of climate change, solidarity, and political movements. So this is how I got involved in climate justice. When I was in 5th grade, my family was eating dinner and we saw Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg on TV, leading a one-person school strike. When I told my parents that I wanted to get involved in the fight against climate change like Greta, they were like, "Oh my gosh, Rosie, we're involved in so many social justice movements already. Can you pick a problem that we already researched and know about a lot?" And I was like, no. And the next day, my mom's work friend named Carlos was giving a presentation about climate change. And in response to my mom telling him what I asked from the day before, he answered that parents can't stand in the way of kids wanting to learn about the climate fight, and that we should totally get involved because this crisis is worth learning the science of a whole new subject. So during the next few weeks, we had charts and articles and papers all over the house, learning the science as well as about political movements mobilizing all over the world for climate justice. So I started running these weekly Friday climate events called Fridays for Future in my school since then. And every youth or every school student can too. It started small, me organizing little gatherings on Fridays with just a few friends. We talked about one climate fact a week, and gradually we learned about climate change one fact at a time, and we grew our movement throughout the years. So I kept organizing these Friday events, and I've spoken at local and national climate events as well. So I'm here today to get every young person here to join the fight. So what is climate change? Climate change is global warming caused by human activity. The burning of fossil fuels created by coal energy and gas-guzzling cars is one of the main drivers of climate change. One example of climate pollution is gas fuel that's burned when you drive gas-powered cars or fly in an airplane. And another cause of climate change is deforestation and changes in how we use our land. And all of these cause fires and floods and devastation for people and ecosystems everywhere. If we do nothing, polar bears will be extinct in 80 years and probably much sooner. And 1 million plants and animals are at risk of extinction. Right now, oceans are warming as if 5 Hiroshima bombs were dropped on the ocean every second. Scientists say that we have 9 years left to pass bold action to get our carbon emissions on track. And in 9 years, by 2030, we have to be halfway towards our goal of eliminating our use of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. And we have to have a good plan to get to net zero emissions by 2050 worldwide. That means that this is the greatest threat facing our generation. But it also means that there is still time to act. We must rise up together and question authority, because the truth is, adults and those in power are not currently doing enough to stop climate change, because their generation will not be affected as much and see the consequences of their inaction as much as ours will. So we need to vote people into office that will make real change. Youth Youth have to lead the charge to save our futures because no one else is going to do this job for us. Right now, the greatest challenge facing our generation is the climate catastrophe. And young people around the world are rising up to stop climate change. And you can join the fight. You can be a change maker, and together we can be the difference. Thank you.
Let us center ourselves and enter into this moment breathing deeply, calling upon all the sources of love that are within, among, and around us. We gather in this sanctuary of caring across time and space, a place set aside as a sanctuary amid the many challenges of life. A center from which we... To face these challenges with courage and hope, faith and love. In this time of reflection, we lift up those in our community and beyond who are living through significant passages, the small and extraordinary milestones of life. Within our Cedar Lane community, we send healing wishes to Mary L. Jimenez, who is recovering at home after a serious illness. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to others whose lives are lost and whose lives are impacted by violence, calamities, and the COVID-19 pandemic in our world. Let us hold these friends of ours, our companions in the world, and all the joys and sorrows we hold in our hearts in the spirit of prayer and reflection.
Would you join me now in the spirit of prayer and reflection? O nameless one of many names, infinite spirit, sometimes called grandfather, grandmother, father sky, earth mother, creator. We gather to praise your creation, to honor the swimmers and the crawlers, the four-leggeds and the winged ones. We give thanks for the beauty and glory of creation. O Holy One, open our hearts to new ways to understand our place in the universe, not the center or focus, but a humble and balanced place where every step we take becomes a prayer, where every word we say makes harmony with the vast vibrating cosmos. O Spirit, we pray for humility, not to humble ourselves before presidents or priests, but before the ants and the trees, for if we cannot be in true relation to the ant, we shall be outcasts of the garden. O Spirit of love, teach us to love this earth, our home. Teach us to be servants of life and not prideful masters. Teach us to be more responsible and accountable, to not look away at the sight of misery condoned, to not close our ears when we hear of suffering shrugged away, to resist the inroads of arrogant wrong from whatever quarter, and to struggle against oppression. May we search in faith for the green fields beyond the deserts of this time and commit ourselves to restoring balance. In the name of all that is holy, life-affirming, life-sustaining, we say, Shalom, Salam, Om Shanti, Amen, blessed be. In the silence of these moments, those who are mourning a loss or marking the anniversary of a loss are invited to rise in body and or in spirit or share the names in the chat. Let us enter the silence together.
Each week at Cedar Lane, we have an opportunity to practice generosity through giving. We have an opportunity to bring our checkbooks in alignment with what we state that we hold most holy. We build this community together, this community that holds us so closely and weaves us together day after day, year after year, and it makes love work. This community. It makes love work here. It makes love work in our community and in the world. Now, there are many ways to give at Cedar Lane. You can give by text, online giving, PayPal, QR code, by mailing a check, or by leaving a donation in the offering bowl at the back of the sanctuary. But I want you to know that however you choose to give, we are grateful for your generosity and your support. Today, we're sharing the plate with the Unitarian Universalist Association Office of the United Nations. And if you watch this video, you can learn with me some more about their work.
Happy UN Sunday from the UUA office at the United Nations. Since our office was created in 1962, Unitarian Universalists have held a prominent place at the UN, advocating for UU values on the global stage. By engaging every day with member states and agencies and speaking out in defense of human rights and to protect our planet, our UU office has become a force to be reckoned with at the UN. We're working right now to mobilize a coalition within the UN community to address the global prevalence of violent repression of political opponents, minority groups, and others by increasingly militarized police forces. We know that only through collaboration and mutual support can our world address the most pressing issues of our time. For instance, the international community must come together to solve global problems like climate change. And we know that governments and multinational companies aren't the ones who have the right solutions. Solutions must come from communities that are most impacted by the changing climate. And our office at the UN is proud to be able to help representatives of those communities get access to attend international gatherings, like this November's UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, so that their perspectives can be heard at the decision-making tables. None of this would be possible without the generous support of Unitarian Universalists. The UU office at the UN relies on congregational and individual donations to continue its work. Please donate generously to sustain this important presence at the UN. Congregations with at least 5% of their members donating at a supporter level of $60 or more are on their way to achieving the 6th Principal Congregation Award. Thank you so much for your generosity. Your gifts can truly make a global impact.
As the offering is given and received today, we want to lift up a special dedication for today's musical offering. As Travis recorded this, his wife, Melissa, had just had a special cancer treatment. This heartfelt musical offering is dedicated to Melissa and all of the other Cedar Lane friends, fans, and members that are out there fighting battles too. Your true colors are shining through.
With the sad eyes, don't be discouraged. Oh, I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, in the darkness there inside you makes you feel so small. But I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful like a rainbow. Ooh, show me a smile then, and don't be unhappy. Can't remember when I last saw you laughing.
If this world makes you crazy,
taking all you can bear,
you know you can call me. I'll be
call because you know I'll be there. And I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. Your true colors are beautiful like a rainbow.
I can't remember when I last saw you. This world makes you crazy, and you take it all you can bear. You call me
up because you know I'll be there.
and I see your true
colors shining through. Your true colors are. So don't be afraid
to let them show
your true colors are shining through. I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid.
to let them show your true colors, your true colors are beautiful.
Today's reading is from the United Nations Environmental Sabbath Program. We have forgotten who we are. We have alienated ourselves from the unfolding of the cosmos.
We have become estranged from the movements of the earth. We have turned our backs on the cycles of life.
We have sought only our own security. We have exploited simply for our own ends. We have distorted our knowledge. We have abused our power.
Now the land is barren, and the waters are poisoned, and the air is polluted.
Now the forests are dying, and the creatures are disappearing, and the humans are despairing.
We ask forgiveness. We ask for the gift of remembering. We ask for the strength to change.
After sustaining life for 1 billion years, our Earth is tired, on the brink of collapse. The burden is heavy, and Earth's children must lay it down. Here's the deal.
On the day when we lay this burden down, when we lay this burden down, gonna pick up a golden crown. When we lay this burden down, 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 children, lay this burden down. The earth, she carries a heavy burden, we gotta lay it down. We have heard, and now it's time to heal the sacred ground. Children, lay this burden down. We can't expect the earth to restore us until somebody lays it down. Children, now the mission's been put before us. We gotta get up, you can't ignore us. Children, lay the burden down. We gotta take it, break it, throw it on the ground. Children, we got to end this burden. Children, we got to break this burden. It's time to lay this burden. To lay this burden while the earth grows increasingly tired. The fevered pitch goes higher and higher. By desperation, we're inspired to put the burden down. Children, children, take the burden, put it down. Children, children, take it, throw it on the ground. Children, everywhere, burden that we share, gonna clear. Children, when we lay this burden down, when we lay this burden
Good morning. I'm deeply grateful to Reverend Abby and Reverend Katie for the opportunity to join the Cedar Lane community again this morning. As Reverend Abby mentioned, I was honored to join the Cedar Lane community in the summer of 2020 for the Kiplinger lecture. I focused then on the ethic of radical love in the fight for educational equity, and began our discussion with the story of James Reeb, a UU minister at All Souls Church in Washington, D.C., who worked with the American Friends Service Committee in Boston. James Reeb, inspired by Dr. King's call for fellow clergy to join the struggle for racial justice in Selma, participated in the march at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. After the march, James Reeb went to Walter's Cafe, a Black-owned restaurant. And when he left, he was beaten severely by several white men and days later died from his injuries. I grounded our conversation then in the summer of 2020 in the story of James Reeb because his life so powerfully captures the ethic of radical love, the willingness to take personal risk and to sacrifice for the sake of others, for the sake of justice. Reeb's story challenges us all to ask, in the face of injustice, in the face of deep moral wrongs, what am I willing to risk? What am I willing to give up? And his story strengthens our courage to pick up his mantle, the mantle of Dr. King, of John Lewis, of Fannie Lou Hamer, and to continue the unfinished struggle for racial justice. As the events of the last year and a half have shown us, from the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor to the Confederate flag carried by insurrectionists into the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, to the relentless effort to restrict and undermine access to the ballot, particularly for African Americans, the fight to ensure racial equity remains a part of America's great unfinished work in the pursuit of liberty and democracy. And today, even as we continue the challenging work of turning the phrase Black Lives Matter from rhetoric to action, even as we seek to dismantle systemic racism and the legacy of 400+ years of anti-Blackness, we must simultaneously confront the monumental challenge, indeed the existential threat of climate change. And we must understand that these two struggles are deeply interconnected because the consequences of pollution and the toll of climate change fall disproportionately on communities of color. And so this morning, I want to focus our time together again on the question of ethics. I want us to ask ourselves, what is our moral responsibility, individually and collectively, to act on climate and to address environmental injustice? From the Native American peoples across the United States on whose land we now gather, to the Judeo-Christian tradition, creation stories play a pivotal role in faith communities. Genesis chapter 1, verse 29 reads, "And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-yielding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food." Those words from Genesis can be understood to reflect a dual meaning, both a gift of the benefits of the earth, but also a sacred trust of responsibility for the earth. Drawing on the Buddhist faith tradition, the Dalai Lama said presciently in 1990 of humanity's relationship to the earth, "Our ancestors viewed the earth as rich and bountiful, which it is. Many people in the past also saw nature as inexhaustibly sustainable, which we now know is the case only if we care for it." And the Hindu spiritual leader Amma has said, there is an inseparable bond between man and nature. For man, there cannot be an existence removed from nature. When I think of those words from Amma, I think of Reverend Dr. King's powerful message in the letter from a Birmingham jail. He wrote, "In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." For Amma, and no doubt for Dr. King as well, the garment of destiny includes not just mankind, but the earth itself. The fate of humanity is inextricably linked to the health of our environment. We hear then across faith traditions a promise of bounty and a profound charge of care. But how are we doing? As a former social studies teacher and middle school principal, I like a report card. Clear feedback on where we're doing well and where we are struggling. And in this case, as you all know, our report card is not good. In fact, we human beings, entrusted, I believe, by God with responsibility for caring for the planet, we are failing. Indeed, the recent report from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns that climate change is at code red for humanity. The report states plainly that it is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land, and warns of a future of increasingly dramatic changes to the climate, from extreme heat waves to intensifying storms and floods to agricultural and ecological droughts. And despite the denialism in some quarters that amounts to a deeply misguided or horribly cynical call tantamount to "don't believe your lying eyes," we can already see what the IPCC report describes. From wildfires in the West to hurricanes of increasing frequency and intensity in the Southeast, to the flooding here locally in Ellicott City and Howard County, or the loss of farmland on the eastern shore of Maryland, the consequences of climate change are here. Climate change is not a 50 years from now problem. It's not even a 20 years from now problem. It is a today problem, and delaying action will only dig our hole deeper. And as is often the case, the consequences of our short-sighted decision-making fall disproportionately on those who have been historically marginalized. In Maryland, it is our Black and brown communities that experience the most dire effects of our continuing dependence on fossil fuels and our inability to rein in air pollution. Consider that in Maryland, Black folks are more likely to die from heart disease, from cancer, from strokes, and 2.3 times more likely than white people to die from asthma. While a variety of factors, from nutrition to access to health care, undoubtedly influence those statistics, there is no question that consistent exposure to air pollution plays a key role in those health disparities. And the consequences are far-reaching. Think about the fact that just this week in Baltimore City, there are kids who miss school because of asthma. They will be behind academically as a result. They will be less able to access opportunity as a result. That is a consequence of our policy choices. So where do we go from here? How do we keep our historical failure to act and the consequences we are already seeing from climate change from paralyzing us? How do we make sure that we aren't just stuck observing the problem, commenting about the problem? How do we move from concern to action? In 2015, the International Confucian Ecological Alliance said, simply yet powerfully, "Sustainable, harmonious relationship between the human species and nature is not merely an abstract ideal, but a concrete guide for practical living." Indeed, our collective charge must be to heal the earth through our individual and collective action, or at the very least, to get busy reducing the harm. Reading a short essay by my friend, the scholar Angela Duckworth, recently reminded me of an unlikely source of inspiration for how we should move forward from here. Leon Leone's 1963 children's book, Swimmy. Now, you may recall that Swimmy was a little fish who was living a joyful life with his brothers and sisters. And then a big fish came and swallowed up their whole community, except for Swimmy. Swimmy was left alone to wander the sea. And eventually, Swimmy found a new school of fish to befriend. And he wanted to go explore the sea with them, but they were scared. They were scared to leave the area behind the weeds and rocks. They were scared that a big fish might come along and swallow them up. And then Swimmy had an ingenious solution. He declared, "We are going to swim all together like the biggest fish in the sea." And by swimming closely together, they made their little school look like a giant fish, and they were able to safely explore the sea. Invoking Margaret Mead's powerful observation, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Angela Duckworth points out that Swimmy's story challenges the idea that individual action and collective action are a binary choice. It is neither about personal change alone nor societal change alone, but both and, particularly when facing a daunting collective challenge like grappling with climate change and environmental injustice. With that lesson in mind, inspired by Swimmy's call to collective action to meet our common challenge, we have a responsibility to act on climate. What does that look like? Well, it requires policy change and personal change. It requires bold and immediate action. For me, I think that should mean for us in Maryland that we commit at a minimum to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2030, and that we put ourselves on the path by 2035 to net zero greenhouse gas emissions. But doing that requires particular change. It requires a willingness to change our approach to buildings, our approach to transportation, and our approach to renewable energy. All of our public buildings should be using renewable energy. All of our schools should be using renewable energy. All of our college campuses should be using renewable energy. By 2030, we should commit that every one of those public institutions will rely on renewable energy alone. We need to think differently about new construction. We shouldn't be digging our hole deeper each time we build a new building. We have to change our standards to say that new construction must rely on renewable energy. We have to change our building standards to say we won't keep expanding our reliance on natural gas. We have to take on the challenge of weatherizing our existing buildings and then retrofitting them, commercial buildings, homes, to rely on renewable energy instead. That will require commitment, it will require investment, and it will require discipline. We have to think radically differently about transportation. California has committed that by 2035 you will no longer be able to buy combustible engine cars, new cars in California. We need to make a similar commitment in Maryland. We need to move as quickly as possible to all of our state vehicles, our public transit buses, our school buses being electric. We need to build the electric charger capacity around the state so that we can quickly move our personal vehicles to electric. But that alone won't save us. We also have to think differently about public transportation. We have to finish the Purple Line. We have to go back and reverse the terrible decision to cancel the Red Line project in Baltimore City, which was bad for climate and bad for economic development and bad for racial justice. That project would have connected the poorest neighborhoods in the city with the places where the jobs are. It would have transformed the city economically, and it would have reduced our fossil fuel footprint. We need to build the Southern Maryland Light Rail Project. We need more MARC trains. We need to expand the MARC train out further into Western Maryland. We need more buses. We need transit-friendly street design. We have to approach transportation as an urgent tool in our effort to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. We have to embrace walking paths and bike lanes. We have to imagine a future that is about people, not just about cars. Now, we also have to get serious about renewable energy. We should be leading the country in offshore wind. We aren't, but we could. We should be leading the country in solar, but we aren't, but we could. We should be doing more to expand geothermal, and we should be driving innovation through all of our scientific capacity in the state, innovation in areas like hydrogen, so that we can move as quickly as possible to clean energy throughout the state. And as we engage in this work to tackle climate, we must be ever mindful of issues of environmental injustice. When we ask, where shall we start? We should start with the communities that have borne the greatest share of the burden. The first places to get renewable energy, the first places to get clean buses, the first places to get the electric charging stations should be the places that have suffered the most in the past. And we have to take on the environmental wrongs we've committed. The fact that there are kids in schools today where you can't drink the water in the building because of the lead in the pipes, that is a moral offense, an environmental tragedy for which we are collectively responsible and which we must collectively address. If we do all of these things, we in Maryland can be a beacon to the country and to the world for how we take responsibility for acting on climate. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge the sad reality that the damage we have done already has consequences that we actually cannot reverse. We must adapt to. I think about the city of Annapolis, where if you go to downtown Annapolis at the waterfront, it's asphalt parking lots. Those have to go, and they need to be replaced with green space that will be permeable, that will absorb some of the water that will inevitably overflow because of storms that will be more severe because of climate change. We have to be thinking about adaptation. We have to prepare our state and future generations to adapt to the consequences of the choices we have made. So what is our call to action, our collective call? How do we get these things done? Well, I believe that it demands of us activism, individual activism. It demands of us to rise to the challenge posed to us by the life lesson of James Reeb. It requires us to sacrifice. It requires us to get in the fight. And I want to share two stories of activism, one a cautionary tale and one a charge. The cautionary tale is one that I heard as part of work that I do as a co-chair of a national commission on mobilizing the K-12 sector to take on climate change. And I co-chair that bipartisan commission with Chrissy Todd Whitman, who was EPA administrator for George W. Bush and governor of New Jersey. And we have an incredible collection of folks, leaders in civil rights and education and the environment, former governors, former members of Congress. But the most powerful conversations have been listening to the testimony of folks who are in school districts, in communities, educators and students who are getting change done at the local level. And one person that we heard from was Laura Capps, who's a school board member in Santa Barbara, California. And she told this very painful story of running for the school board, thinking that she was going to get the school board to attend to issues of climate. Remember that in this country we have 100,000 school buildings, 480,000 school buses, 2 million acres of land. Schools can play a critical role in combating our reliance on fossil fuel. And so she thought she would win people over with the strength of her logic and the clear evidence for a need for action. But she actually didn't. Folks weren't that interested. They wouldn't listen. They thought she was kind of annoying, the way she would always bring up climate issues at every meeting. But then there were fires. Wildfires, and then there was a drought, and then there was tremendous rain from a storm, and then there were mudslides, and the loss of human lives, the blocking of the highway, the 101 there, for 2.5 weeks, the closure of schools and businesses. And then finally, people paid attention. And then finally, there was a willingness to act on climate. And finally, there was a commitment from the school board to change their infrastructure practices and their instructional practices to meet the moment. And a commitment to go from 0% renewable energy to 95% renewable energy in just about 2.5 years. I share that as a cautionary tale because we should hope that it will not take that kind of disaster to finally spur us to action. I share that story to say we have to push our neighbors and friends to act now before we face these sorts of horrible consequences. Now, the other story I want to share is a call to personal action, a charge for all of us, and that's the story of Colette Battle. Now, Colette Battle is the executive director of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy in southeastern Louisiana. And Colette was a lawyer. She was living in D.C. She grew up, though, in southeastern Louisiana. And she turned on the TV one day and saw the gathering storm of Hurricane Katrina and worried about her family. And when Katrina hit and her community was devastated, she made her offices in D.C. a remote crisis intervention center where she was trying to coordinate support for family members and community members back in Louisiana. And she realized that she needed to do more. And she went home. She decided to go home and try to help. And then she decided to stay home and try to prepare the community to take the action necessary to mitigate the harms that climate change will bring and to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. And now Colette has become a leader in the effort to make sure that the Black Lives Matter movement incorporates issues of environmental justice and climate action. Because Colette is a believer that our challenges are deeply interconnected, intersectional, intersectoral, and require understanding across these different issue silos. And Colette has been described as bringing to her work creativity, strategy, and fire. And I want to argue that that's what we all need to do. We all need to bring to the climate struggle creativity, strategy, and fire. So let me close by returning us to the question of ethics. In that letter from a Birmingham jail, Dr. King wrote, "Human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation." We are all called, I believe, to be co-workers with God. We are inheritors of a mighty tradition. The tradition of Frederick Douglass, the tradition of Dr. King, the tradition of John Lewis and Rosa Parks, of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, of James Reeb. We are inheritors of that tradition. And as inheritors of that tradition, our responsibility to be co-workers with God means we need to make different choices. Personal choices about our cars, about the roof of our home and whether or not we put on solar panels, but also collective choices. Will we show up at the school board meeting to demand that we move to electric buses, that we put solar panels on the roof of each of our schools? Will we show up at the General Assembly to demand that our legislature act on climate, that we change our approach to buildings and transportation? Will we rise up as young people like Sophie have? Will we rise up and demand of our federal government real leadership on climate, not just in moving the United States away from fossil fuels, but really calling on all of our neighbors across the world to join us in the urgent effort to save humanity's existence on the planet. And as we do that, we have to ask ourselves, what risks will we take? Will we protest? Will we engage in civil disobedience? Will we be willing to be arrested for the cause we believe in? What sacrifice are we prepared to make? And so Reverend Abby mentioned that we gather not far from where my great-grandfather was enslaved, in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And I think a lot about my great-grandfather and his family, and the fact that they lived for a future they could not see. That I am alive today because they survived. That their creativity, their strategy, their fire, like Colette Battle, is the reason I am alive today. My family is alive today. I think all the time about the cruelty of the institution of slavery that they endured. Reverend Abby mentioned that the cabin where my great-grandfather lived as enslaved person is still standing on the property where he was enslaved, still owned by the family who are direct line descendants of the family that enslaved my family. And I've had the opportunity with my wife, Melissa, and my daughters, to stand inside of that cabin and to contemplate the immense cruelty of an institution that allowed my family to live just 30 yards from the main house. Two families living in the same space, one owning the other. So many of our challenges today tied to that history around slavery, around segregation, around redlining. But the other thing I contemplate standing in that cabin with my daughters is how profound it is that in 3 generations, my family went from enslaved in that cabin to serving in the cabinet of the first black president. What a powerful... That is a powerful statement to my ancestors' resolve. I look back these many, many decades later at their resolve that made today possible. And so for all of us, what are we resolved to do? What will we want said about our response to the climate challenge decades from now? How will we hope our great-grandchildren will remember us and the choices we made? So I leave us with the charge to have the courage to act, the courage to sacrifice for this planet God has blessed us with, and for the justice we all deserve. May God bless the struggle for climate action and environmental justice. May God bless all of you. Thank you.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from a rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my new boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companion. companions? Are we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the light of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home? I give thanks to the waves upholding me, and the great winds urging me on. Breathe the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Thank you, Dr. King, for your inspiring message, your challenge to us, and the charge to take individual and collective action to deal with the climate change emergency that we find ourselves in. We're grateful for your message, your presence, and your inspiration. Thank you. As we come to the end of our time together, we know that everything that we do here is an expression of how we want to be with one another and the people we yearn to become. We're grateful for everyone who comes together to create this community, for each and every one of you here and at home. We're grateful to our worship team today, Reverend Katie, Dawn Bliss, and Marlene Berg, Rosie Clemens Cope, and our worship associate, Ezra Town. We're grateful to our co-music coordinators, Dr. Jasmine Lee and Jenny Lynn Moyer, our Cedar Lane Quartet, and our Cedar Lane Choir for the inspiring music that has supported and nourished us throughout this time. A special thanks to our AV team who, week after week, make worship happen. Michael McCrickard, Mike Morse, Barb Thompson, Todd Chernikoff, and Ariel Mora. And to Jose and our facility staff, our hospitality volunteers, and our pastoral volunteers, our religious education staff and volunteers, and Lynn Peters for that beautiful flower arrangement. It takes a village, folks, to make Sunday happen. We are grateful. Friends, fans, and members, please join us with your favorite beverage and snack for a virtual coffee hour after the service. And for those of you gathered here, join us in the courtyard for a real coffee hour with real donuts in the courtyard, where we will have a chance to connect with Dr. King and Mrs. King. Next Sunday, join us for a special service with Reverend Katie, Kathleen Reedy, and members of the Cedar Lane Pagan Group for a time of celebration and remembrance of loved ones who have passed. And I close our time together with this ancient prayer, which calls for many blessings upon all of creation. Om Bhumi Mangalam, Udaka Mangalam, Agni Mangalam, Vayu Mangalam, Gagana Mangalam, Surya Mangalam, Chandra Mangalam, Jagat Mangalam, Jiva Mangalam, Deha Mangalam, Mano Mangalam, Atma Mangalam, Sarva Mangalam, Bhavatu Bhavatu Bhavatu. Sarva Mangalam Bhavatu Bhavatu Bhavatu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Blessed are the heavens, blessed is the earth, blessed is the fire, blessed is the air, blessed is the sun, blessed is the moon, blessed are the waters, blessed is the land, blessed are the animals, the birds, the mountains and the seas and the valleys, blessed are the fields and orchards, blessed is the mind, body, and spirit. Blessed are all who protect the earth and all her creatures. Rejoice and be glad, for the earth and her people are one. May it be so. Blessed be. Let us go in peace. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
It was wonderful.
It's a beautiful service. Thank you for the opportunity to join you all.
Thank you.